Hi everyone, it's Jackie at Spare Room Studio. Today I'm going to use Faber Castell watercolour pencils to colour this page of Alice and the Mock Turtle, and it is from Alice in Wonderland colouring book by Max Brenner. Now I felt like sticking with this book because so far I've used alcohol markers and coloured pencils in it, and today I wanted to try something water-based to see how the paper will cope with that. Now, generally, Amazon Australian printed books cope okay with watercolour and water. This has a slightly smoother feel than the paper normally does. It's about the same weight, but I'm not sure how it's going to actually react, so we will find out together. Now, I've got a backing paper down there, I've got some paper towel, I've got a selection of water brushes to hand. See how we go with those. I've got some Chromatech brushes here that were a very kind gift from Jo at 120 Colours and her lovely daughter Georgia. So thanks again Jo and Georgia for my gift. We'll see how I go with these brushes today, whether I cope okay with those. And I'm going to use the Faber Castell Albrecht Durer watercolour pencils to start with, the plan that hopefully I can do it all with watercolours, but if I can't, I also have Faber Castell Polychromos pencils to hand, and I thought I'd do a full Faber Castell colour. So for this one, I've got absolutely no idea, as per usual, how I'm going to approach it. So I'm going to start with a pretty basic colour for Alice's skin, and then I will build up from that and add other colours as I go along. So to start with, I am going to use a combination of brown ochre and cinnamon. Now my collection of Albrecht Durers, or my set of Albrecht Durers, is easily 20 plus years old. So some of the colour names, I believe, have been changed in that time, you know, to become a little bit more inclusive. I think it's some of the ones that used to be called Flesh. So I apologise if I get those names wrong, but I'm not familiar with the new names. And already I can see that that water is making the page buckle up immediately. And I have put quite a bit of water on there, but I'm going to take the challenge, you know, head on and see how it copes. Because I've mentioned to somebody in the comments, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, but I think it might have been Karen of Karen's Hobby Time or something like that. I mentioned to her that sometimes we don't make the best breakthroughs until we allow ourselves to fail, and it is only paper, and this book is very generous in size. There are lots of pictures, so if this one doesn't work out, there's nothing to worry about or get uptight about, because there are plenty of other pages that are perfectly colourable, and I want to colour, so you know, sacrificing one page is no great hardship really in the whole scheme of things. So what I'm doing is I'm using a couple of different techniques here. First off, I wet the paper first, and then I dropped the colour onto the paper. Now I'm just taking a more cautious approach, and I'm lifting the colour from the pencil with the damp brush and applying it to the dry paper. So I'm going to use a combination of techniques for whatever seems to work and suit, you know, the area that I'm colouring at the time. This picture has, it's a very large picture, and it's very focused just on Alice's face and the mock turtle, so there is a lot of open space to colour, which will give us an opportunity to play with colour. So to start with, I'm choosing very, very basic skin tone colours, but as I go along and I've got everything worked out, I will bring other colours into her skin as I go along. So this is just a base starting point, and from here I can add many other colours and it will still work. So this brush is quite dry, it's not flowing freely, so now we've got a little bit more water there, so you know, you can gauge how your brush works and all those sorts of things to work out what's going to be the best way to use it and approach the page. So I've been really enjoying this book, and as I say, I did colour 2 pages already that have been alcohol marker base with lots of coloured pencil added, and I used Prismacolor for those pages. So this time I want to try the Faber Castell Polychromos if I need to add pencil, just to see how they work on this paper and in this book with the grayscale. Now grayscale worked really well with the alcohol markers. It's not a dark grayscale, it's quite light, and so it worked really well with the alcohol markers, and the paper being on the smoother side again was a perfect choice with the alcohol markers. So I wanted to see how watercolour or water-based products would work with the grayscale, and again the paper being a little bit different to what I'm used to. And it is buckling quite a bit, but we'll see how it dries. You know, you never know, it might dry nicely, or it might be suitable to put a couple of sheets of paper over it and a hot iron and see whether that, you know, takes out some of the wrinkling as well. So I'm just doing this all as a bit of a base for Alice, for her hair and her skin, and then they're pretty neutral pale colours, so I can add just about anything with this as I go along. And what I'm going to do to get started, I'll just put that cinnamon aside. I'll keep the brown ochre out, but I'll also add in a bit more of a deeper brown, and I'll start putting some colour down on the mock turtle. And my plan for that, let's have a look, what am I going to use? I always struggle with this name, Caput Mortuum Violet. And the number on there is 8200, that is on all the pencils, and then 263. So let's get started with those and see how that works. So I'm just squeezing more water out to just get this brush a bit more damp. It's not flowing all that freely at the moment. I just loosened it off to see whether I can get a bit more of a airflow through it. So I'm dampening those areas first, and then I'm going to treat each little section separately here, rather than doing a wash of colour over the whole lot and then coming back, because I want those spaces between each of these sections to stay very light coloured. Now I could have done, you know, a cream or a light wash over the whole lot to start with, and then come back with the details, but I'll show you a few different ways of working. So I'm going to keep swapping between the two, and what that means is that this brown ochre is actually taking on some tinges from the violet that was still on my brush. But that's okay, I'm letting that blend on the paper. Now if you're new to the channel, you haven't seen any of my videos before or how I like to work with water-based media and in particular watercolour pencils or Inktense or any sort of water-soluble pencil. I'm not keen on colouring onto the paper and then activating it. I like to hold the pencils in my hand, and I like to take a little bit of colour from the tip and apply it with the water brush. And generally I like to use the water brush just because it's convenient. I do have a pot of water off to the side for cleaning brushes if I need to, but I generally find that a water brush for me is much more convenient way of working. It's quite controlled, whereas with a brush and water, sometimes the brush can be too wet or too dry, and getting that mix is sometimes hard. But once you get to know your water brush, generally you get a feel for what the water flow is like with it, so it's a bit more controlled, and you know, you sort of know what to expect from it once you've worked with it. So that's my preferred working style, and that's because I've used this over quite a few years, and as I say, my watercolour set here, my Albrecht Durers, is, you know, it's got to be about 25 years old, I think. And this is just the way that I've developed that I prefer to work. I've quite often found that when I colour onto the paper directly first and then try to dissolve it, I don't quite get that watery, washy look that I'm wanting, that I prefer. And I just like sometimes that I can do this where I wet the paper and then I can get very washy, blended effects like that working this way. And I could do that again with a brush and onto the paper with a normal brush and a pot of water, but none of these things are exclusive. You can sort of mix and match styles and do different techniques and so on, but this is just something that I've come to enjoy doing. I like the effect that I get at the end of it, but the process, the actual process of working, I find much more, pardon me, frog's back, I find it much more relaxing, and there's just something about watching those colours blend and move on the paper in the water like this that I find very soothing, and I just enjoy it. And so I encourage you, with whatever medium that you're working with, you know, watch tutorials, watch how people are using them and the suggested ways that you can use them, and then experiment for yourself and see what actually feels nice to you. Because the process of colouring and painting should be pleasurable. It shouldn't feel torturous, and it shouldn't feel like a chore. And you know, if you're dissatisfied and you're finding that you're not getting the results that you want following those technique style videos and following someone else's working style, take the time to play with your materials and experiment and find something that works for you. You know, you might have a go at what I'm doing here and totally hate it, and that's okay if you do. It's perfectly okay. I certainly am not saying that anybody must work this way, but I'm offering it as an alternative to you from other ways that you may have watched people work. And especially if you're feeling sort of dissatisfied and not getting the results that you want, or the enjoyment, not even about results orientated thinking here, but just enjoyment. Because we can still get enjoyment from our colouring. We can produce an awful page that we may not want to show anybody, but there can still be an element enjoyment in the process. You know, allowing yourself to become process driven over results driven will give you a totally different experience to your colouring. So just working between those two, very random. I don't want it to be matchy at this stage. I want it to look random, because I can always come back at the final stages with coloured pencil and, you know, work out some details that I've missed or that I don't like. I can alter just about anything at the end with coloured pencils if I want to. Now, I have no idea what colour turtles' eyes are normally, and that's not necessarily a natural colour for a turtle anyway. This is the mock turtle, so, you know, it's not actually meant to be a lifelike turtle anyway, even though this artist has portrayed it very much in a realistic manner. So I think I might go for, I'll just go for a colour scheme that works for me, and I'm going to go for, this one here is called Burnt Ochre, so I'm going to go for more of a tawny, orangey, golden sort of colour eye is what I'm thinking. So I'm going to put a little bit of that down first, and then I'm going to find something that's a little bit more yellow in nature. This is dark Naples ochre. And I'm going to put some of that down there. Now, because I haven't worked in this manner in this book before, I have literally no idea whether it's going to work or not. Going to dark cadmium orange here just to get more of an orange look up here. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to allow myself to fail on camera with you guys as well. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and I'm not going to beat myself up about it, but I'm going to share it with you regardless, just so that you can see what I mean by, you know, you don't necessarily know ahead of time how something's going to work, and that's part of the fun of this one, is just trying those different things, see what happens, and then as I go through the book I've got other options. So that I've gone back to the burnt ochre now, and because I've got that in his eye, I'm going to add it into some of these areas around the eye as well. So one of my working practices that I'm try to do a lot of the time is to keep using the same colours in various parts of the picture to tie the whole look together, to get some continuity going and to describe relationships between things on the page. But the same thing goes when you've got a big thing like this as well, is that I want to obviously make it look like that eye would naturally be with this creature, and by doing that I'm using the same sorts of colours in different ways. Now I could have gone with something like a green, but in doing that it would still be worthwhile to pick up some of these colours that are in here and put a little touch of it into the eye as well, because our eye is a shiny surface, and it tends to pick up, you know, little touches of things that are going on around us in reflections and so on. So that's enough for there at the moment. And on that same vein, I'm now going to use the violet to just come into some of those darker, deeper areas in the shadows. I'm not sure if you will pick up any background noise on the video or not, but it's extremely windy here today, but it's strangely warm with it. So I've got doors and windows open just to try and warm the house up a little bit. But we have a storm front that's heading our way, so it's extremely windy. But it helps sort of, you know, freshen the house up, warm it up a little bit before another cool front comes back through. We're very much experiencing spring weather at the moment, where it's up and down. We have a really nice day, and then next thing we know there's another front coming and it's crazy windy and, you know, cools right back down again. Some evenings have been rather cold, so we're experiencing a bit of everything. But thankfully, to the recent work that we had done with our veranda roofing, there's no knocking and banging from that now, which is really comfortable and much more pleasant when it is windy. I know Hamish didn't like it because he's scared, but even as a human who knows what it is, it was still annoying listening to it. So the new roof is a lot quieter, which is nice. So I'm just putting little touches of that around in the edge of the eye. Max, the artist, has put a lot of details in here for us. And then while that's still damp, I'm just going to touch the pencil to the damp paper and get a little bit of extra colour that way, which I'm not going to dilute again. So Max has put a lot of detail in there with lines and grayscale and so on to give us some hints to how we might colour this. Okay, so I'm going to put those aside for now and move on to another area, because I like to keep moving around and working out the colour scheme and then come back and firm things up. So next I need to work out what sort of colour outfit that Alice will have, and generally she has, I think it's a yellow dress, isn't it? I don't really want to do another yellow dress, but I might do blue, but I'm going to go for the greeny blue. Let's have a look. So I'm going to go for something like this helio turquoise. Now you can see that I use this method quite a bit, and so my pencils start to wear down gradually. But it takes some time because working this way, you don't tend to use a lot of pigment at once. And so I don't have to sharpen these pencils very often. And you might be able to see there I've used more water again, and it definitely buckles the paper immediately. And what I like to do is wet that paper and then just gradually work up the colour by picking more and more colour until I get to that depth of colour that I want. But I like to start light, because with watercolour, once it's down, if you go too dark too soon, it's very difficult to lighten that back up without bringing in something like a acrylic paint pen or a gel pen, for example, or a coloured pencil in white. And then it tends to flatten the colour. I don't quite know the best way to describe it, but I find when I use white over watercolour, it's the white version of dirtying a colour. It sort of takes the vibrancy away and makes it look rather dull and a little bit dirty, for want of a better description. So I try not to do that as much as I can, and the best way to get a highlight with your watercolour is to try and preserve the white of the paper so that you don't have to come over it with other products. So I'm going to bring now a little bit more of a blue into that. So I'm going to bring in light phthalo blue. And most people would have used that light phthalo blue first, but I wasn't sure what the turquoise was going to look like, and I'm thinking that it just needs a little bit of a pick-me-up in some areas, which is why I'm coming back with the actual blue, just to help pick that up and give it another brighter look. So if you're working with watercolour, there's some very well established guidelines of the best way of order of working with your colours. But working with a watercolour pencil like this is very different, and so you don't necessarily have to follow all those watercolour guidelines. They are very helpful, and that is to sort of start with your lightest colour in washes and build the colour up with washes. But given that I'm not on watercolour paper, I'm on colouring book paper and glorified copy paper as this is, I don't have the liberty of building the colour up in layers like that quite so much, and so what I'm choosing to do is using those colours sort of alongside of each other together rather than layering. And that just helps save some of that buckling and cockling of the water, because the paper just can't cope with too many layers of water. I push it as far as I can, but realistically, copy paper can only achieve so much, and it can only take so much water and pigment. And so this is why I've developed this way of working, because it works for me, and I can still get the look I want without all those layers of water going on the paper. So I've decided that this ruffle here, I wanted it to be a continuation of that colour. This I want to look like lace. So I haven't decided what that over the band over the top of the shoulder there is going to be yet. And you can pick up both, bits of both colours on your brush and get some random blending and make a new colour that way. Okay, for now I'm just going to leave that quite light like that. So the water that is up here, I'm going to mimic those colours a little bit, but make it a bit lighter. So I've got cobalt green that I'm going to put up here. And very, very lightly, I'm not sure if it's even picking up on camera, but very, very lightly have been suggested some shapes of fish with absolutely no hard details at all. It's very, very lightly suggested in. And I'm just going to suggest some of that colour in between the strands of her hair, because Max has quite strongly described all the strands of hair here. Not individual strands, but you know, those groups of locks of hair. So here it kind of suggests she's in the water as well, but then this is so clearly defined. If they are underwater, they're very, very close to us. So what I can do to maybe suggest that she is underwater is to use that same cobalt green, and start to bring in some shading with that as well. And that's going to give the idea that perhaps she is underwater as well, and this is the colour of the water reflecting on her. So of course we're going to have bits of it on her hair as well. So it's suggesting that she's under the water without really trying hard to colour it like it's underwater, if that makes any sense at all. Because if we were up close to her, say we were, she's underwater and we were snorkeling and we were up close to her, the water would have no colour at all. But what reflects on her skin will be, you know, where the light is coming through the water, and there are plant life in the water and so on, and it's the dappled light through the water along with any sort of you know, plant life and things that are in the water and so on that actually colours the water, because the water itself has no colour. If we was to, you know, get a jar of the water or a glass of the water and have it in front of us, it might be cloudy because it's salt water, but it wouldn't really have colour in it. But when we're doing an illustration and we're doing artworks and so on, quite often we just have to use colour to suggest things that aren't actually there. It's the same if we were to portray a subject that was in the air. The air itself does not have any colour. But, you know, we know that the sky can be grey or blue or whatever in the distance, but the air right in front of us, the air around us, has no colour. And so to suggest different elements, we use colours and association and so on to suggest the air around us, the water around us, for example. And it helps to suggest movement and what's going on. So in the same vein, we also need to put a little bit of that into the turtle. Otherwise it would just look very, very bizarre. And so I'm trying to do it with areas where it was lighter coloured, but also to make it a bit more realistic, you do need to put some of that over the top of those deeper violet colours as well, so it looks like it's layered over it. And try not to be too perfect with it, because you know, we're trying to sort of suggest dappled light, and it's not going to be perfectly in those little round bits. And at the end I will have to do the same with her. When I've finish describing all her face properly, then I will have to bring in a bit of that over the top again to match what I've done with the turtle. So I leave those colours out so I can remember what colours I've used there. Now Alice, I'm thinking I'm going to give her, what colour eyes can I give Alice? Maybe I can match the turtle. That might be interesting if she's got the same sort of tawny golden eyes as the turtle has. And Max has put grayscale and he's indicated where there would be a light reflection. So I'm going to use the white of the paper. Now usually with eyes, there's a bit of a shadow cast by your top eyelid, so the colour of your eyes will appear a little bit deeper and darker at the top there and lighter at the bottom. It's just the way that the light reflects on our eyes and the shadow that's created by those eyelids. And I'm just going to add in the burnt ochre here, so it's going to be very much like the turtle's eye. And again, people's eye colour doesn't usually appear to be a solid block of colour. The light is reflecting on there, you've got other colours reflecting around because your eye is wet. The surface of the eye is wet, it reflects things. So if you put those little touches into the eye, especially when you're up close like this, it makes it a little bit more believable. Or I feel that it does anyway. But very, very rarely do you look at someone's eye and just sort of see a block of colour with no light and dark in there. So keep that in mind too when you're doing your colours for your eyes. And Max has done a really good job here of all the eyebrow hairs and so on, but I don't need to paint every one of those in. So I'm just going to do that for now and suggest that colour in there. And because I've gone so bold with that eyebrow, I'm going to start going a bit more bolder with her hair colour in places. I want there to be a lot of light because I think she's, you know, underwater, dappled light coming through the water and so on. So there's going to be some very, very light areas where, you know, a lot of light might be hitting the top of her head, but the rest of it I'm going to start doing a little bit more bold. And I'm just lifting that off the tip of the pencil with the wet brush or damp brush and onto the dry paper again at the moment, just in those areas where I want it to be a bit more vibrant. And with hair, it's really important that you try to get lots of variation in light and tone, light areas, dark areas, you know, shadow areas, mid-tone. You want a bit of everything because that describes the shapes and the movement without having to paint in every single hair. You know, our hair, even if our hair is one natural colour and we haven't dyed it, but say you're a natural brunette or you've got black hair or red hair, whatever colour, whatever your hair is, when somebody looks at you, it doesn't look like you've got a solid helmet of hair on your head. The light is reflecting and causing lots of highlights, lots of shadows. And so if you want to make something more believable, more natural looking, then you need to be thinking about variation in the tones. And the more dramatic that you make those changes, those lights and darks, the much more exciting your picture is going to look. So I'm really quite liking the way these colours are coming together. It's not a colour palette I would normally work with. I'm trying to expand my choices because I tend to, well, I have been tending to work in colouring books with very, very vibrant colour, very saturated colour, and I've been wanting to sort of use every colour in the box on one picture. It's just a stage that I've gone through, but also because I've been choosing a lot of images that suit that, I've been going for very quirky, whimsical, comical, sort of non-realistic images that I've had a lot of scope to do that with, and so I've had a lot of fun playing with it. But every now and again I feel like I just need to tone things down a little bit and become a little bit more cohesive and a little bit not laid back or muted, but just tone it down a little bit. And this particular picture I thought would be nice for having a go at something like that. And I've completely forgotten her neck. So what's starting to evolve here is that I started to think that I wanted to have sort of, you know, what could be acceptable flesh colours. But as I'm going along, it's again moving more to that fantastical, artistic interpretation of an image that is not necessarily based in realism now, and more about storytelling. And that's quite often what happens with my pictures, and that's why I don't plan them, because I find that once I start working and I get a few colours down and I actually start to really look at what the artist has drawn on the page in front of me, that little bit of narrative starts to unfold a bit. And just a few choices of colour and technique suddenly start taking you in a very different direction. Okay, so again, I think we need to start coming back with more of the cobalt green and start strengthening up some of those areas where that would look nice to be a bit bolder. We want some lighter areas, we want some bolder areas. It's very tempting when you've got a big image like this that's very much, you know, focused in, the focus is very much on one area, to try and make it very realistic and very believable and real, and to focus on all the detail. But I feel like, for me personally, this gives me more scope for loosening up and starting to experiment with the colours and make it a bit more playful. Because I find that if you want to go for hyper-realism, that actually takes quite some effort. And you need to sort of get it just right. And I'm at a point at the moment in my creative time that I'm not looking to do that. I'm looking to just enjoy the colour, just enjoy the process of watching how the colours blend, how it goes onto the paper, how it feels. You know, like how is it an enjoyable feeling to have, you know, a scratchy pencil? Is it enjoyable to have a smooth flowing marker? Is the unpredictableness of, or unpredictability, I should say, for better English, of watercolour and that lack of control of the result, is that enjoyable? How is it actually feeling? Does it make me feel stressed? Does it make me feel relaxed? You know, I'm sort of more in that phase of thinking rather than always thinking about the result. So I'm just looking at the lines that Max has put on here just for some ideas, and I'm just making it bolder in some bits, less bold in others, because water, we know water is not static, it's moving, and very rarely is it completely one solid colour when you look at a sea scene. Lots of light and shade for what's, you know, is it a sunny day? Is there water coming through, sunlight coming through the water? Is it a dull day? Does the water look murky? So many different ways that you can colour water and underwater scenes. And if you have difficulty picturing all of that and how it should look, and you want ideas, then don't forget to Google or go to Pinterest and have a look at those things. So I need to start suggesting a little bit of a shadow there maybe. So I might go now for the light phthalo blue again. And this brush is not a free-flowing water brush like I'm used to. I'm just squeezing a bit of water in there to try and blend that out a bit again. So I'm getting the feeling like the light's going to be concentrated here, you know, this part of her face. And that's why I've put some blue into there. And then we'll just do that there on the turtle as well. And I feel like I'd like a little bit more of that in her dress there. Just for a little bit of drama, because, you know, we don't want the whole page to be that one level of intensity. We want some a bit of drama going on to tell the story. And I'm just going to use the cobalt green just to do a little bit more here on this part of her face and eye, cheek. And just suggest that little bit of shadow . So remember what I said, that all shadows don't need to be black or grey. Shadows can be made up of whatever colour that might be around and reflected into that shadow. As the same with reflections and so on. Just give her a little bit of drama there going into the eye. And I think a little bit of that underneath the eye here as well. Just as you know, it just adds that little bit of drama in there. And I just think that might be a little bit too green, so I'm not sure if you can see. Let's see if I can get up closer here. Can you see? Can you see how I wear that tip away to just about nothing? There's no waste there at all. Now what you can see here is where the paper's buckling. There's some shadows being cast there that aren't actually on that page there, but it's the shadow from the window, light from the window making a shadow there. And now that I'm looking through the screen, I can see how obviously wrong this bit here is on its own, so that will need a bit of attention as well. So it's really good sometimes to take a photograph and have a look at your work through a photograph. It will start to show you where you need to add more light and dark and tone, where it might be lacking. And another thing that you can do is just prop your book up somewhere and stand back at a distance, so that you're not looking at the actual details of the picture up close, but what you will see from a distance is, again, those places where light and dark is required, you know, where the page is actually looking a little bit dull and lacking, will become really obvious when you stand back. And another thing that you can do that helps with that as well is to squint at your picture and look at your picture through squinted eyes. And what that does is it just helps you to stop focusing on the details and start looking at the tones and the colour and the intensity of those things, rather than the actual, you know, eyeball, the nose, the lips, or whatever. It just helps you to let go of that and see where, you know, it will become obvious that there's an area that's just really boring or lacking, because you just don't want to look at it. Your eyes, you know, don't want to linger on it. By the same token, if something's really, really obvious, like that bit there was too obvious, it was way too concentrated there in one spot, that became really obvious as well. There was too much of a contrast. Once again, I hope that explanation sort of makes sense to you, but yeah, you need to sort of sometimes step back to just see the page as a whole, because when you're working on something like this and you're working close, it's very easy to get hyper focused on one particular area and overwork one area at the expense of others. So that's something that you do when you're creating a painting or you know, an original piece of art. You do that quite frequently. You keep standing away from your work and looking back at it and reassessing those things constantly. But in colouring books, we tend to forget to do that, because You know, we're usually sitting at a table or a desk, hunched over our work, and we become hyper focused in on the details. Okay, so I'm going to stand up again and I'm going to look at that again. So to me that feels like it's blending in a little bit more. And I don't want to overwork it and start making it too muddy either. And I'm just going to add some of that colour into her hair so that we get a feeling of that. Now I find when it comes to faces, if you want to make a big thing of lips, downplay the eyes. And if you want to put the focus on the eyes, you put a very subtle lip. Don't put the same intensity of detail and colour into both, or it starts to compete. So I'm feeling like it's better to leave her with a subtle lip and very dramatic eyes. But what I will do is I'm just going to get that original colour. What did I use originally? Cinnamon, wasn't it? I'm just going to put a tiny touch more, pardon me, of the cinnamon into her lip colour. And there's a nice touch of grayscale there that's helping to influence that colour and give it some shading as well. So that's plenty of colour now for that. And I'm going to use that cinnamon colour up here on some of these fish. Or the fish shapes. And then I don't want that to become a detail in itself, so I'm actually going to just add a bit of basic grey in there, so a cool grey. Because I don't want those fish to actually be a focus. They're just helping to support the story, but they're not part of the story. And that looks like she's got some sort of seaweed in her hair there. So I need to think about how we're going to describe that. I don't really want to increase the colours to include a really weird green, but let's have a think. Let's have a look. What have we got in here that might work with that? What about this? Is deep cobalt green, and I'm going to do it very, very subtly. And what sometimes works with that, and I hope this is going to work, it's a bit of a gamble, but I'm going to put a bit of a yellow green with it. This is apple green. And that's going to be the highlight colour. And then back to that cobalt green. So generally the cobalt green's got the touch of blue, so that's going to suggest more of the deeper shadowy areas, and the yellow green, the apple green, is going to be suggesting these points that are higher and catching more light and more to the forefront, and the cobalt blue, the cobalt green, deep cobalt green, is going to be these bits that are more in shadow or behind or underneath. So anything with a yellow tinge, a warmer tinge, usually indicates that there's a bit more of a light source, whereas the blue tinged cooler greens and colours tend to suggest being more in shade or further away, not catching quite so much light. And that deep cobalt green does look nice as a shadow colour, so I'm actually just going to bring a little bit of that down here. Not a lot, but just a touch, just to give that bit of a dramatic, more intense shadow. And I feel like we still need a little bit more. This is going to need a sharpen soon. And there you go, I've just taken the tip off of it. I've got my little plate here, so I'm just going to let that dissolve on the water on the plate. So that's just the very tiny tip of my pencil has come off there. We just need a little bit more suggestion of that in here. There's just a little bit too much white left at the moment. And of course we'd have a little bit of shadow underneath that seaweed hairband that she's got. So I'm just going to put a little bit of burnt ochre into there. A little bit under here. So hopefully you can see how I'm building up that area of intense light is right on her face, and hopefully making her the focus of the picture. Yeah. And at the end I'm going to darken up some of her eyelash line there, but that will be at the end when I bring some pencil in, I think. Let's just put that aside again for the moment, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of the Helio turquoise and just put that into that area there. So this strapping, or not strapping, but whatever this is over the hair, I'm just going to put a touch of blue in there. I don't want it all white, but I do want that lace edge to stay reading as white. And this hair here is a little bit too bright white, but I don't want it really colourful. We'll just put a little touch of the brown ochre in there, and a little bit into there. So these areas where you've got a lock of hair that's quite strong and bold like that, the areas behind it and underneath it will be a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. And so I think what I'm working towards here, as I'm looking at it, is her eye, that eye in particular, and his eye, those two are going to become points of focus to catch your attention. And then your eyes will travel around after that. So you can see my paper is really starting to turn up now. So what I might do is put the Albrecht Durer aside for now. And I'm going to get the Faber Castell Polychromos out just to put in some details, and then we'll see whether that is sufficient or whether I need to do anything else to it. So for her eye, I don't want to use black. What I will use maybe is a Payne's grey. And I'm just going to come in like the very underside of her lash line. And a little bit softening out from the corner for her bottom lashes. And Max has put some lines there for eyelashes, but I don't like to draw all eyelashes in, so I'm just feathering out a little bit more colour to suggest that she's got a little bit more than just a few random eyelashes, and then very softly suggesting a bit of colour along that lower lash line. I will use black for the pupil, I think. Move that aside because that's damp. The same with the turtle, just on that very inside edge of his upper lid. Just going to run a bit of colour. This is the Payne's grey, and a little tiny bit there in that lower fold, and I will do the pupil and shadowy areas of this eye, not so focused, but just a bit of colour there to darken it up. And the same going for these scales. I don't know if they're scales, but you know, these bits in the skin here, just to suggest that it's not smooth, but it's a bit textured and lumpy, and a little bit there. So instead of black, I'm using Payne's grey. And again with that eyelash line, just the very underside of her lash line and a bit of the eyelashes. Because I want that eye to sort of be more in focus, and same with that one. A little bit there on the inside of his nostril. And I I'm going to use the black for the actual pupil here. Now, more often than not, I'm just going to follow what the artist has done. I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel, and he's done a really good job of suggesting some very subtle light sources other than that bright highlight there. So I'm not going to blacken all of that up. And in the very corner of her eye, I'm just going to suggest a little bit of colour because we have that fleshy part of our eye. This is coral. We have that little fleshy bit of our eye there that I'm just going to suggest lightly, and a little tiny bit on that inside part of her lid there, upper lid, and a little tiny bit just on the corner of her lip there to strengthen that bit of colour and shadow. And a little bit of warmth there, just to indicate that this is actually living flesh. There's a little bit of warmth and life in it. Now the Polychromos on this paper, because there's no tooth, it's probably going to want to work in layers, light layers to build it up, because there's not much to grab onto there. And I want to strengthen the colour in this eye up a little bit. So I've got the burnt ochre in the pencil, and I'm just going to do a few of these suggestions of lines in the eye that Max has put in here. And that darker outer edge, I'm just going to use that. So instead of looking grey, it looks a little bit warmer. Still keeping in mind that he's left some areas that look like they're a little bit lighter, so that's what I'm going to try and preserve. And then we had the cobalt green that we put this bit of shadow under here with. And I'm just going to do a few little bits of that. In various areas, just to strengthen that up. And the same with this. I'm not going to colour in every strand, but I am just darkening up and strengthening up some areas just to tell the viewer what they're looking at. And what I'll do at the end is just decide whether I have in fact got enough of that suggestion of water across her face. I might have to come back with the Albrecht Durer and just do a little bit of colour there. So the apple green, no, that's May green. earth green yellowish. Did they change one of those green colour names as well? Because I don't recall seeing earth green yellowish. It's not going to hurt to bring in a little bit of that green down here as well to help that eye around the picture, and also, you know, perhaps he's got a bit of algae growing on his skin. And just do some work on that eye. So going for the Caput Mortem Violet in the pencil. I did have that Albrecht Durer that I put there that I didn't dilute, so and I'm just going to strengthen up the oh, that's sanguine. What a okay. I think there's a few different names, more different names than I realised. That's okay. This one's India red. Still don't want to lose that yellowy so this is Naples yellow. You know, I don't want to lose that complete tawny yellow, golden yellow look. How is he looking through there? Not too bad. So I'm going to bring in a little bit more of this cobalt green though. I just like those little pops of vibrant colour here and there just to catch the eye. Wow, it's getting gusty out there now. I don't know if you can hear that. Hopefully my son's going okay. He's renting a trailer today and moving some of his stuff that he has stored in his grandparents' shed into his rental property, so hopefully he is driving safely with that on the back of his car. Unfortunately, I'm not of any use at all at the moment for moving furniture or, you know, really moving anything, so I have stayed out of the way and letting the young ones do it. Oh, I'm just worried about how that's reading there, whether there's enough of a suggestion of the shape of her face. I think it is. And the light phthalo blue that I put over here is very subtle, so I'm just going to put a tiny touch of that just to help with that. And of course the blue against the yellow and the orangey colours is they're complementary colours really, so that's why they tend to work next to each other in a pot with a bit of a pop of colour. So when you're using unusual colours like this, if you have trouble, have a look at the colour wheel and colour theory. Google it on the internet. You can have a look at Pinterest and places like that, and you'll see people have got lots of information about colour wheels, colour theory and picking colour. But yeah, that very much blue against the orange and the yellow really is working like the complementary colours, even though they're slightly different tones of blue and yellow and orange, it's still working. Okay, so we're coming up for an hour and 20 minutes. I think that we might be able to call this finished really soon, which is, I'm really pleased that I've been able to do it in one sitting. So I've just got back the Albrecht Durers that I had left out. And I'm just going to suggest a little bit of blue in there, and I'm not going to actually dilute that. The reason I'm not going to dilute it is that I want you to focus on those two eyes first before your eye then travels around the picture. So I actually want it to be quite focused here. And then your eye can travel around. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully very carefully, let's get a brush that I know works a little bit more freely. And I'm just going to lightly suggest the cobalt green over her face there. So you can see why I'm doing this last, because once this dries, I can't really work at those details that are under it, because this is going to suggest that, you know, this is water over the top of them. And you know how you get that dappled light and colour in water? It's not a straight band of colour. And what I'm doing is working it in with the colour that's behind there, so that it's not going to necessarily bleed and blend and create a new colour. It's just going to work with it, because that's where I've put that colour anyway. And the same up there. And same down here where we already had the starting of that colour anyway, just okay. So the only thing that is a problem here is that I'd like to lift it up and show you all the details, but of course it's not dry yet. So you've got that very cockled, buckled look. And we just need to blend a little bit of that so that it's not such a sudden change of colour again. Yeah, okay, I think I'm going to call that. Alright, so let's have a look at it. Bear in mind that the paper is very wet still. It's very cockled or buckled, and it will flatten out a little bit, or I will have to maybe iron it. But there you go, that's how it looks from a distance. And that's how her eye looks. You see how I didn't try to draw all those eyebrow hairs in, because Max has already suggested enough there. That very, very subtle use of colour on her lips there. And you've got the grayscale underneath working perfectly. And there is the turtle eye. Now I could potentially work on this quite a bit more and turn it into a very structured, detailed, blended image, but I like it as it is. I like just those few little areas where I concentrated on, and then the rest of it is very loose, relaxed, and you can see that in an hour and a half I have a completed page, and I'm quite happy with that. That is good enough for me. Okay, I hope that you've enjoyed that. I hope that it has been useful in giving you some tips. If you have any questions at all, please pop them into the comments for me. And I'd like to know what you think of that, whether you think I should have done anything differently. But I'm going to leave it there. I think I'm quite satisfied with that one. I'm just hoping that it will naturally flatten out a little bit and I don't need to try getting the iron on there, because, you know, I don't iron clothes very often, so I don't even like getting the iron out to do a book very often. But maybe once it's closed and under a heavy weight, it will flatten out a bit. So there we go. We have Alice and the Mock Turtle in the book Alice in Wonderland by Max Brenner, and I've used a combination of Albrecht Durer, Faber Castell Albrecht Durer pencils, along with the Faber Castell Polychromos, and you saw that I really didn't use very much of the Polychromos at all, just enough to give a bit of detail. Thank you for being with me and sharing your time with me again. I will see you again really soon. Thanks for being with me. Bye now.